Hello everyone, and welcome to my 4th episode in the Zero to Hero challenge. I only played for 2 hours this week as my trip is coming up and I wanted to have a short video available for me to schedule for release while I'm away for the next 2 weeks. This has to be one of the worst weeks I've had in Mythic Plus this season. I'm sure you're all going to enjoy the fails to come and the struggles that I had. As with every week, I opened up my vault, didn't have too many good choices this week once again, but did have 4 slots available. I simmed these just to see which would net me the biggest gain, and it turns out to be the cape from Smolderon. I picked it up and equipped it. This raised my item level slightly up to 454. I didn't want to waste any time doing the Emerald Dream weeklies and wanted to quickly start running Mythic Plus, as I only had about 2 hours available this week to work on the challenge. The affixes for this week are Fortified, Incorporeal, and Sanguine. In preparation for the Incorporeal affix, I changed a few talents around so that I could pick up the Hex ability. My first key, a Dark Heart Thicket 14. While waiting for the group to fill, I did decide I'd spend a little time in the Emerald Dream completing what weeklies I could, primarily for the gold, as none of them could provide me with an upgrade in an equipment slot. I didn't expect it to take quite so long to fill the group. I ended up having enough time to complete the Super Bloom and Worthy Ally quest. I also handed in the quest from the Emerald Dream's main story to get an enchanted worm's crest that I could later use to craft an item with an embellishment. At this point we were still missing a couple people in the group, but I decided to fly to the dungeon in the hopes that it would get filled soon. We eventually filled the group, and while waiting for someone else to come help summon, the healer left. Luckily I managed to get another healer in relatively quickly, so it didn't slow us down. This key was a total mess. Nothing seemed to go right from start to finish. Right at the start of the dungeon, the tank made a rather large pull, taking the first 2 packs and then the bear too. I thought this might be a little bit too risky, as taking the bear too on a fortified weeks with pugs can be quite risky, I feel. I was right in this regard. I started to output my damage but was targeted by 2 leaps and the healer was dropping low too. The bear's roar came in and finished off myself and the healer. We both released and ran back, but during this time the warlock and paladin DPS fell too. There was also a wall of corruption on the ground as the tank moved the pack further away. I also took a couple of hits from a fixating ad trying to get in range. The healer ended up popping his bubble to get to the tank as myself and the other DPS kept running in, only for the Incorporeal affix to spawn and getting off casts. Things just kept getting worse and eventually the tank fell and everything reset. This is probably the worst start I have ever seen to this dungeon so far. Once we were all back up, the tank took it slower from then on. In hindsight, I did forget to lust, but I think the 30% increased haste wouldn't have helped either way. 12 deaths in and not a single mob killed. At least it couldn't get much worse. I'm honestly surprised no one left. Starting on the first pack again with the Ret Paladin AFKing at the back, we slowly started to get the pack down. I got leaped on by the Nightclaw and my health slowly dropped, and I eventually fell to the debuff without getting a single heal from the healer, as he was focused on healing himself. I should have used my defensive here, or perhaps even a self-heal or Warlock Health Stone. Either way, the first pack fell at last, and it only took us 13 deaths to do so. We continued to clear the trash and reached the single grizzly once again, but the tank pulled and also aggroed the 2 patrolling casters. I tried my best to interrupt them when I could, but we lost the warlock rather quickly. I made sure to focus the bear as the ground was quickly getting filled up with corruption. Whilst doing this, the paladin fell shortly before the bear. The room then became clear and we could kill the casters without issues. 4 packs down and only 15 deaths. The 5th pack caused us no problems, and then the tank took a route I haven't seen in years, and jumped down, pulling the pack of 4 mobs and also managing to aggro the patrol. Everyone started to drop low rather quickly. It feels like the healer was really struggling to keep people up. I did use my defensive to reduce the damage as much as I could. I should have probably used the Earth Elemental too. More leaps and debuffs went out from the Nightclaws, and many people began dropping. Myself and the Warlock were the first to fall, followed by the healer and Ret Paladin as well. We were running back. I managed to catch up to the tank just as the Incorporeal affix spawned 2 ads. I hexed one, but the other ad got a cast out and the tank fell, and then left the group. That was the end of the key, and the final words of our holy paladin. Shit tank. And that was it for the key, with a grand total of 22 deaths in less than 10 minutes. The key downgraded into a 13 Dark Hat Thicket, and I formed a new group, hoping this time it would be better. At least we didn't have to worry about the incorporeal affix. The run went much smoother this time, with only 2 deaths throughout the entire run. Other than the 2 deaths, however, we cleared the dungeon and ended up upgrading my key by 3 item levels, and my Mythic Plus rating increased to 1171. I was also very lucky and got a nice ring from the chest, letting me upgrade my 418 item level ring to a 460 item level ring, increasing my total item level up by 3 points to 457 in total. Not wanting to waste time, I quickly formed a group for my next key, a plus 16 Atal'Dazar, and during this time I also set up a crafting order for my wrist to get the first embellishment onto my shaman, as I had enough gold from completing the weeklies in the Emerald Trium to do so. The group filled before anyone made my crafting order. I made sure to leave a good tip in order to make sure it was crafted for after the dungeon. This key ended up being a total clown show, with mistakes happening all throughout the dungeon. I'll do my best to cover them all in as much detail as I can. The start of the dungeon went fine. Razan caused us no problems whatsoever, and everyone followed the tactics. Both the Hunter and Death Knight DPS were around 15 to 20 item levels higher than myself, and so the boss fell rather quickly after his 3rd pursuit. The DPS from the Death Knight was a bit lower than I expected, but it didn't really matter, as this is only a 16, and Atal'Dazar is an easy dungeon in my eyes, especially on a fort week. I couldn't have been more wrong. After Razan, things started to go downhill, with people dying on almost every trash pack. We moved up the stairs and started clearing to Volcal, with the first reanimated honor guard. The pack was going pretty well for the most part, and then the incorporeal affix appeared. Myself and the hunter CC'd them rather quickly without them getting a cast out, but suddenly the tank died. This caused the ads to aggro everyone in the group, myself included. I popped my defensive to try and keep myself alive, and even dropped my capacitor totem to stun. Just as I killed one mob that was aggro to me, the second one ran up and managed to finish me off just before the tank could re-establish aggro. The pack eventually fell, but the next pack went even worse. The tank charged in and immediately died. I took aggro and also died. The Unholy Death Knight wasn't far behind me, as they all switched to him afterwards. Luckily, the tank got back to aggro the mobs before they took down the healer and hunter. From that point on, we managed to kill the pack and moved on to the next one. On the very next trash pack, just after we killed it all, the reanimated honor guard left its green swirl on the ground, and unfortunately our priest was just on the very edge of it. Not realizing while he healed, he got hit by the explosion and died. As I was going to res the priest, they released. We waited for them to catch up before pulling the next pack. The next pack wasn't going too badly. The tank kept aggro this time and didn't immediately die. We killed the totem while I was interrupting the casters as best as I could. Unfortunately, one of them got a hex out onto the Death Knight. He got dispelled rather quickly, but not too long after we lost our healer to a Venom Blast, which I failed to interrupt. Not having a healer, our health were dropping low, but we managed to keep ourselves up long enough for the priest to rejoin us and finish off the pack. We moved on to the pack just before the second boss, and while we were fighting them, the Shadowblade stalkers that patrolled the stairs below got pulled too. At the same time, a hex cast managed to go out. At this point, all but the tank were rather low on health. I fell to the ongoing damage just before my defensive would come off cooldown. I often seem to forget about the Earth Elemental, which could have saved me here and previously too. With me dead, the hunter fell, and not long after we both released and ran back. While running back, the healer and Death Knight died too. I managed to make it back to the pack just as our incorporeal ad was about to cast, and I managed to hex it. The healer wasn't here yet, so I used my defensive but was dropping low again along with the other DPS who managed to make it back. The Death Knight fell again, followed by the hunter, just as the priest got in range. With all the damage going out, the priest managed to die yet again, and I was surviving on 7% health. Another incorporeal ad spawned and got off a cast before I noticed it and hexed it. Finally, the pack fell and we could move on to the second boss at 14 deaths. On the second boss, when all the totems had reached around 15%, 2 incorporeal ads spawned at the back of the room. I ran across the CC one and interrupted the other, but by then they had already gotten out 2 casts and the second one remained unCC'd. The boss didn't get interrupted, causing us to gain 3 stacks of the debuff and killing us all, taking us up to 19 deaths. The second attempt went better, and we killed it and moved down the stairs to the next trash pack, only for us to have yet again another death. We lost the hunter to a double Venom Blast cast. I definitely need to stop focusing on my rotations so much and pay more attention to interrupts, as I could have potentially saved him if I interrupted one. But at this point, what's one more death? Fortunately, it seemed like our problems were over and we got to the third boss without anyone else dying. The third boss was a little bit messy and took a while, as 1 or 2 people often didn't soak a blood pool for the transfusion ability, enabling the boss to heal itself, but we managed to down it eventually. The next death, after the third boss, was of course to a shadow spider while running up the stairs. I didn't manage to see the druid die, but did witness his health drop suddenly to 0. At this point the timer expired and I just wanted to get this dungeon over with, thinking all our troubles were over and we could just kill the last boss. I couldn't have been more wrong, and here is where the clown show really begins. We pulled the boss and I immediately lusted, and the tank pulled the boss into the doorway behind its starting position. The group would often run to the small stairway at the other side of the room for the soul rend ability, but it was a very far run for the Death Knight and his ad was usually the furthest away from the rest of the group. At around 35% on the boss remaining, the soul rend ability came out, we grouped up, but the Death Knight was a little slow and as such the ads ended up being spread out. The hunter then got hit by a spider and died, and I also made the same mistake, getting hit by a spider shortly after the hunter. I used my Ankh and managed to survive the tick from the pool, only for the healer to die shortly after, but he was quickly combat rezzed. The boss's HP was getting lower, but one of the ads had hit the boss, placing a debuff on everyone. I died to the debuff but got combat rezzed. I took it without thinking and was instantly killed by a spider. At this time the incorporeal affix came into play, and with no one CCing it and the hunter ignoring it, it placed out 2 stacks on everyone and this resulted in a wipe. The second attempt didn't go much better. We had the soul rend at the same time as the affix spawning. I managed to CC one, but the other ad was completely ignored, allowing him to get 2 casts off, making it so we couldn't kill the souls, which eventually hit the boss, debuffed the group, and as we couldn't heal, this eventually led to a wipe. The third attempt was going pretty well until around 45%, where I made the stupid mistake of running into a shadow spider, getting myself killed instantly. Not too long after, we had an incorporeal affix spawn at the other side of the room just after the soul rend ability. This ad was once again ignored and it managed to get out 2 casts of the debuff while the boss was only at 18%. This caused people to not get healed and they began to drop like flies, causing yet again another wipe which could have been avoided if anyone decided to CC or interrupt the ad in the back. On the 4th attempt again, things seemed to be going better, although the tank did not want to move the boss at all this time, causing the area to get very crowded with spiders. At around 45%, the healer got hit by a spider just as he was targeted by the racking pain which finished him off. At the same time, I also managed to get clipped by a spider. Luckily we had a res for the priest this time around. With the priest back up, we kept fighting the boss. We eventually had another set of ads spawned. I interrupted one and CC'd the other, hoping the hunter would ice trap the remaining one. He did do this, but far too late as the ad had already gotten 2 casts off. Luckily, it wasn't at a point in the fight that could wipe us. But at this stage, people began to fall after the next soul rend. First the hunter, shortly followed by the Death Knight. The boss was only at 10%, so I continued to focus the boss as much as I could, but the area was getting very crowded as the tank didn't move the boss. Myself and the healer eventually got hit by spiders and died, leaving the tank to solo the last few percent as the boss hit its last 300k of health. 2 ads spawned and began to cast their destabilize ability, and by a miracle the tank managed to kill the boss right as they got out their 2 debuffs, very narrowly missing another wipe yet again, and allowing me to leave this nightmare. Looking back, I know we lost a few players to cast throughout the dungeon, so I did have to quickly check, and it turns out I didn't do too badly on interrupts, as I had the most in the group along with the most CC too. With the dungeon completed, I also had my crafting order fulfilled, but didn't have time to test my shiny new braces as my time was up and I needed a break after the circus I was just in. To summarize the week, I ran 3 dungeons, but only one gave me rating, taking me up to 1171 in total, and 457 item level. The Atal'Dazar ended up being a total of 46 deaths and 45 minutes long. This gave no rating, as it should. That's all for this episode. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like, comment and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel. See you next time, and have a good one.